Good.
Go.
Good.
Congratulations to you guys. Awesome.
I'll just wait a few seconds for them to log in. Okay, everyone ready? Lynn's still connecting. She's heard this before. Okay, ready?
Yep.
Welcome to the Monday, June 15th, 2020 meeting of the East Lampeder Township Board of Supervisors. My name is Corey Meyer and I am the chairman. I want to inform all participants that this meeting is being recorded. Due to the COVID-19 virus and Lancaster County's designation of being in the yellow phase of reopening, in-person attendance for this meeting is being limited to a maximum of 25 people in the meeting room. Therefore, this meeting is also being offered virtually utilizing Zoom, which is a cloud-based platform for remote video and audio conferencing. Those participating in the meeting in person will maintain social distancing in the meeting room. The Zoom application is free to the public. The general public is therefore able to join the meeting by connection through the internet or by calling in by phone. The township is expecting to utilize this vehicle for all future public meetings during and after the COVID-19 crisis. Please continue to check the township website calendar for any updates related to these public meetings. Agendas for these public meetings will also be available on the township's website and will be posted on the front of the township building. Joining me in the room while observing social distancing are Supervisor Ethan Demme, Vice Chair John Blowers, Supervisor Dave Buckwater. Also participating to support the board and present in the meeting room is Ralph Hutchison, Township Manager, Steve Zerby, Chief of Police, and Tara Hitchens, Planning Director. In order to accommodate public comments at this meeting, the township will be accepting public comments in writing or via email. Instructions for the submission of public comments are available on the township website. We will now proceed with the meeting agenda. And the meeting is called to order, and let's pledge to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, at this time, we will have public comment for non-agenda items only. Yeah. Okay, if anyone has a public comment that's logged in via the Zoom or via phone call, you can unmute yourself and make that public comment at this time. You'll have to tell us your name and your address. And if you have access to video, we'd love to see you as well. Is there anyone that has public comment on the Zoom? Okay, we'll also have opportunity for public comment after before any vote is taken. I do want to just make a few announcements during public comment. Want to encourage all township residents to respond to the 2020 census. Many of us have been working from home, so we should have plenty of time to respond if we haven't. The PA response rate is currently 63.8%. Lancaster County's response rate is 73.2. This township is currently at 71.7. Not to be too competitive, Manheim Township is at 77.1 and West Lampeder is at 79.7. And responding to the census definitely impacts how things get funded. Many decisions are based on census data, so we encourage all to respond. The website, I did it online, census.gov, I believe, is the easiest way to get to it. And you should have received mailers as well about it. Secondly, also an online opportunity, online survey for the Bridgeport Mobility Plan. It's a short survey. If you live near Bridgeport or you drive through Bridgeport, you probably drive through Bridgeport at some point, either going to work or just going towards the city, or it's a very important piece of the place where we all live. It's an important place that we need to make sure that we get that area right. So that survey will help us make the right decisions for that. So please, it takes probably 5-10 minutes. And lastly, there's also another online survey for the old Philadelphia Pike corridor. It's a multi-township survey, right? So again, you might live near there, you might drive on that road, but please take the 5-10 minutes to answer questions for that survey. It helps the planners plan what the community wants. So, Hutch, any other comments? I know you have comments later, but
No,
okay.
appreciate you including those.
Great. Okay, next on the agenda, we have the consent agenda. And on that, we have a few items of note. We have approval of the minutes of the Monday, May 18th, 2020 regular meeting. We have approval of B, to pay invoices from all funds. It's a total of $664,467.09. Few items of note, significant amounts. We have $9,895 even to Alta Planning and Design for completion of the CV Region Park Plan, which I believe we'll hear later. Yep, under 8C. We'll hear more about that. Is that the final payment? That's, yeah.
It will be.
$57,800 even to Signal Control Products for the adaptive traffic signal system on Lincoln Highway East. That's in it. That is installed too, right?
It's the only thing we have to
Training.
complete yet is training.
Okay. That should help traffic on Lincoln Highway East, hopefully when stores are opening.
man.
Yeah, we
Get those stores open.
exactly. $194,562.87 to the City of Lancaster for quarterly sewer flow charges. $62,500 to the 4 volunteer township fire companies. It's our quarterly contribution, so it's $15,625 each to each of the 4 companies. And then $9,250 to a few different libraries in the area for our quarterly contribution. The amounts are $4,255 to Lancaster, $3,145 to Manheim Township, $1,859 to Peckway Valley. Those are the bills and invoices. And then lastly, we have a financial security release for the villas at 2217 Old Philadelphia Pike. It sounds like the applicant has completed all of the required sanitary sewer improvements for the development. And we have a letter from the Sewer Authority's engineer indicating acceptance of the construction and recommending the release of the remaining financial security for those improvements. And those are the consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second by Dave, second by John. Any other comments from the board? Any comments from the public for the consent agenda? Okay, I'll take that as no additional comments. We'll accept a vote. This is kind of weird doing a vote in person. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. I almost did a roll call. I'll save my roll call authority. Okay, next on the agenda, I asked Chief Zerby to come and speak to us. I have a few comments I'd like to make before I ask Chief Steve Zerby to speak about two subjects. Thank you, first of all, thank you for your continued leadership during the COVID crisis in this unprecedented time in our country's history. I applaud and agree with the comments made by you, the chief of the PA Chiefs of Police Association, and the Lancaster PA Chiefs of Police related to the death of George Floyd. I'm hoping people will take the time to read those posts. They were posted on Crime Watch and social media and lots of other places, so thank you for that. The Commonwealth on June 4th announced several actions to improve law enforcement relations with the community and strengthen training and accountability. One of the items outlined was reviewing training and education of officers. It was stated that accreditation is a key component in assisting departments in evaluation and improvement of their standards and practices. And also went on to say that departments should be striving to obtain state and/or national accreditation. I am proud to say that East Lampeder Township Police Department is a Pennsylvania state accredited agency. In order for us to be an accredited agency, the department has to pass ongoing stringent examinations of our records, our actions, and our board commends the East Lampeder Township Police Department for 18 plus years of continued accredited status. Finally, as some of you are aware, I was recently nominated and approved by the Governor and PA Senate to be a commission member on the Municipal Police Officers Education Commission, MPOETC for short. I'll continue to push for proper training and accountability so that our oath of office as supervisors and the oath that we read our officers and they agree to or swear to can be solemnly and completely followed. I've asked Chief Zerby to provide an update on the use of force guidelines as well as our citizen complaint process. So the floor is yours, and please don't stay for the whole meeting after.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate the time, and thank you for your vote of confidence. I appreciate that as well. I've given each one of you a large packet of papers there, and I'm not going to go over everything that you have in front of you because you can take it home and read it, and I will gladly come back and reconvene with you as many times as necessary to address any questions, make changes, what have you. I'm not opposed to discussing any of these points and or discussing change. And I believe that as we're seeing across the country, change is going to be warranted in terms of how it affects policing going forward. So to start with, you have three policies in front of you that pertain to East Lampeter Township's use of force. And as Supervisor Meyer just said, we are an accredited agency and have been an accredited agency for 18 years. So all of these policies that you have all stem from that accreditation process and those standards. And none of them have been changed at all. You're getting what we've had as an accredited agency for years. If there's change, we'll talk about it, implement it, however we want to go forward, but you're getting what we have had. So the first one, and probably the most important, is use of force. And this is the general overall use of force policy, A7. Some highlights to this. It provides for 6 responses in a range of response continuum. And you'll see them listed there from, I'm just going to say them out loud for the Zoom meeting.
Sure.
We have officer presence, which is mere presence, verbal commands intended to calm suspects, subjects, and create an atmosphere of control. Control and restraint, which includes the use of OC spray, the use of tasers, the use of hands and feet in conjunction with the baton for holds and restraint, but not for striking. Chemical agents, CN and CS gas, which we do have, but they must be approved by the rank of lieutenant or higher before they are deployed. Temporary incapacitation, which includes striking by the officer using either his hands or his feet or a baton to large muscle groups, but not the head, not the neck, not the solar plexus, and not the tailbone. And finally, deadly force, which would be used to protect life of the officer or others when there is an immediate threat of death or bodily injury. Instead of viewing that range of response continuum as a pyramid that an officer works through, the appropriate way to look at that is like a wheel, and the officer is at the hub of that wheel. And you have those 6 choices in the shape of equal pie shapes around the wheel. And the officer needs to be able to go from the center into any one of those 6 zones. You can arrive on a scene where you're establishing mere presence and need to go immediately to deadly force. And that's something that isn't clearly, or it isn't always clear to people as they think, well, you didn't do this or you didn't do that. Well, sometimes the situation isn't going to warrant going through those steps. So I just wanted to clarify that. And the other thing I wanted to say about use of force is we have not had chokeholds be allowed here. They've been prohibited for years. The only time they are permitted is when deadly force is warranted. So, included in our use of force, the officers must provide medical assistance. So this would be after the officer takes some kind of action, and if that results in any kind of injury or bleeding wound, the officer has a responsibility to then get the medical attention that that person needs. Every use of force from verbal commands on up requires its own individual report. That report must be completed by the officer who has used the force within 24 hours. And that report is then reviewed by the division lieutenant and myself. If a taser is used, that is an additional use besides the use of force report. So now we have the officer's incident report, secondly, a use of force report, and third, a taser report. So there's lots of documentation that is going on. Again, these are reviewed by various ranks in the police department. And then the police department itself has a reporting requirement. So this is over and above the requirement of the officer, and this is to the FBI through their LEAP, which is Law Enforcement Enterprise Portal, which we report to for any uses of force that result in death, serious bodily injury, or the discharge of a firearm. So your most significant uses of force get reported there. The other element to use of force is training. So our officers not only read our use of force policies annually, and that is required of them to do every year and sign off on, but the use of force policy is also covered at our spring range, at our fall range, and during every TASER recertification. So there's 4 opportunities for each officer that works here to go over our use of force policy annually. Coming down to the end here, we have reassignment and debriefing. If we were to have a use of force incident that was going to result in an investigation, in particular, maybe something where some type of charge might be levied against the officer, this would provide for reassignment or in fact paid administrative leave until the whole process would be adjudicated. And then of course there's a penalty phase, which I have written down there for you, which can be immediate dismissal on the first offense, or it can be something leading up to immediate dismissal, but the second offense is immediate dismissal. So, the second use of force policy that we have covers specifically our OC spray. I just want to point out that OC spray does fall under the control and restraint, the third point in the range of response continuum. Officers are also trained in how to use OC spray, and this policy covers the type of OC spray that we will use, so an officer just can't buy what they want. We also document our training of the OC spray, and the frequency of OC spray training is in this policy. There's guidelines for usage in this policy. There is also guidelines for post usage. This would be again the medical responsibility. So you spray somebody with OC spray, they're going to have burning sensation in their eyes, and their mucous membranes are going to drain, and we're going to call an ambulance and get their eyes flushed out with saline solution, that type of thing. Again, a reporting requirement, as stated previously, covers the storage of OC spray when it's not in use, maintenance and inspection of OC spray when it's not in use, and the responsibility for every officer to understand and comply with these policies. The third use of force policy after that is batons, defensive weapons, and less lethal weapons. This would cover the type of baton that is approved for carry, how it is supposed to be used, that we must maintain training on the use of those batons, that the baton must be used in a manner with which the officer was trained. I break down there that the deadly force, striking someone with a baton to the head, neck, body, solar plexus, groin, kidney, tailbone, these will all fall under deadly force. Otherwise, it would be control and restraint to large muscle groups only. And then again, same reporting requirement, 24 hours, they have to have that completed, and the responsibility for every officer to understand these policies and procedures. I went through that pretty quickly. Do you have any questions?
No, good. Any questions from board members? I would assume using a police vehicle could be a use of force.
Absolutely.
As well.
And it would likely be deadly force.
Deadly, yep.
The reporting requirement, where does that start in the hierarchy of the 6?
It starts at the second phase.
At the second phase,
Officer
okay.
presence does not require
Right.
a use of force report.
Yeah,
But
but the verbal command,
Yeah, we're not talking about conversation now.
Right.
We're talking
Right.
about an officer ordering somebody to the ground, something along those
Okay.
lines.
Yeah.
So,
I saw in some of the stats, actually taking your pistol out
Yes,
is a type of
yes,
force as well,
yes,
right?
it is, yes. And that would fall under,
Is that number 3?
it would come in under 3, but obviously it would rapidly respond if you had to
Right,
use
right.
it. You're obviously answering to deadly force. We do have officers draw their gun, and that is actually broken down in there. If they do draw the weapon, they must complete use of
Right,
force
yeah.
as well.
Okay, got it.
Other questions?
No, that's actually very clear so far, so.
And again, you have each one of those policies
Yep.
written. And I just want to point out also that you'll notice the different headers on those policies, and that's because we're in the process of moving from one style of header to the other style of header. It's getting done as we have time, so.
Okay.
Yep.
So internal investigations, these would fall under our professional standards and internal affairs policy, B5. You have a copy of B5 with you as well. Our internal affairs investigations and policy states that all complaints will be investigated. It's a blanket statement. There's no exceptions. If we get an anonymous complaint, we still investigate it so long as we have enough information to conduct an investigation. The complaints can come from outside the agency or within the agency. Complaints are investigated either by myself or my designee. Typically, this falls under the responsibility of the captain. Complaints can be received via numerous means: phone, letter, electronic transmission, in person. But in all instances, we always attempt to have the complainant put their complaint in writing.
Mm-hmm.
We don't always get that, and it doesn't mean that we won't investigate it. We do ask for it. Complainants are advised of the potential for unsworn falsification charges. Believe it or not, when we do have people call and make complaints against a police officer that aren't completely true or are completely fabricated, or part of it is true and part of it isn't true. So there are 3 types of internal investigations. There is a formal, which is our allegations of violation of law, brutality, violation of rules and procedures. There's an informal, which is allegations of slow call response, failure to act, unprofessional demeanor. And then there are inquiries. These would be outside of the complaint, but basically questions on, well, why did the officer have to give me a ticket? Or why did the officer have to arrest my spouse at this domestic call? I didn't want them arrested. Things of that nature. For every complaint that we get regarding officer conduct, they are documented. I keep all of those it's my responsibility, so I track everything as to when it comes in, when I've assigned it, when I expect it to be done, what the final outcome is, and they're kept on file. So internal affairs activities, responsibilities at varying levels. What I'm referring to there is that if an officer or a supervisor or a division lieutenant sees something happen, these people, per policy of professional standards, they have a responsibility to say something, do something, take action. Now, it depends on what it is, but if there's something going really wrong, they would physically take action with their hands and do something about it. If it's something else where an officer violated a policy, they should be telling their commanding officer that that occurred. Failure to do so results in punishment for that person too. So those are all covered. And then my responsibility as chief to ensure that all of these things get investigated and that proper punishment is doled out where it's supposed to be. You see there's a time limit there of 45 days. We can extend that based on circumstances. And there is a notification to the complainant of the outcome of this investigation. And then there's also the the employment rights that are covered in this policy, which would basically be that each officer who has a complaint made against them, they have a right to know what that complaint is. they have a right to make a statement regarding that complaint, and they have a right to have some union representative there with them while they are being questioned about that right, or about that allegation. These are all put into writing. I already went over some of the collective bargaining agreement, Officer Bill of Rights things. I'm not sure what I meant about bullet point 3 there. Relief from duty, this would be the punishment phase if they're going to get time off. And then there's different conclusions of fact. There's proper conduct, which is been exonerated, improper conduct, which is sustained, insufficient evidence, not sustained, an unfounded complaint, false or no credible evidence. And at this point, operating under the confidentiality of all internal affairs records, so these are not made public. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. Any questions about how that works?
Thank you.
In your packet of papers, you will see closer to the rear a citizen's complaint form. And this can be sent electronically, it can be mailed, it can be picked up in the office. But it's a 3-page document. It has a cover letter there and then a place for a person to make a written complaint. Those are kept at the front desk. They're kept on my computer. The captain has them on his computer, so we can send these out wherever and whenever they need to be. Everybody has access to those. The other 2 things I included here, which don't really cover use of force or how we handle our internal complaints, but I think are important to highlight just with everything that's going on across the country right now, is our policies on discrimination and harassment in the workplace, as well as our policy on bias-based policing and discriminatory practices. We have policies that govern both. The discrimination and harassment in the workplace policy prohibits ridicule, mocking, deriding, belittling, discrediting, derogatory comments related to race, color, sex, origin, or religion, unwelcome sexual advances, harassment, favors, other things of that nature. Again, here we have the responsibilities of everybody that is required to act. The supervisor is required to report such things, or they'll be subject to a disciplinary investigation themselves. And every member has a responsibility for assisting in the prevention of such acts. That's also covered in that policy. And again, there's penalties for each one of these: failure to act or just committing the offense itself. If I didn't say so before, the offenses, depending on what they are and what category they fall into, we have a retention time span that we have to keep all these things on file. So some things require a 1-year retention. Most things are a 5-year retention. Some things are indefinite retention. But like a simple written warning, somebody who shows up late for work would be a written warning, and that would stay in their file for a year. It would be a written warning the first time, and the second time that would happen, it would be time off without pay. It would be different depending on what each offense is and how long it's kept.
And when an officer is up for promotion, let's say it's a patrol officer who may be up for a sergeant position, are those items taken into account? Any sort of warnings that they received if it's within a time frame?
They would be during the evaluation portion by the superior. It's a very good question. There isn't something written that says if you have this, that, or the other in your file, that you are not eligible for this promotional process if it happened within this window of time, let's say. It would be the responsibility when an officer is up for promotion to sergeant, for example, the sergeant does an evaluation, the lieutenant does an evaluation, and the captain does an evaluation. There's 3 levels of evaluation that are done. And it would be at those times of those written evaluations that the disciplinary file should be reviewed. Yeah, it should be affecting that evaluation.
Got it. Okay. Correct. Yeah. Okay, great.
The second policy there that I wanted to bring in that wasn't asked for is the bias-based policing, obviously very important, and discriminatory practices. Prohibits profiling. There's a requirement there for reporting. Investigations shall be in accordance with practices and procedures outlined in the Professional Standards and Internal Investigations B5 policy. This is reviewed. These policies, is what I'm meaning here, are reviewed annually by myself and the captain. And what we're looking for there is what kind of complaints have been made specifically from outside the agency to about officers inside the agency in terms of their actions and dealings with the public. Do we have one officer that's received 5 or 6 complaints over the past year, and what have they been? And are we seeing repetitive behavior, things of that nature? There's training that goes on with bias-based policing. This is done as part of our accreditation. Currently, it's done once every accreditation period, which an accreditation period is 3 years. So once every 3 years, the officers have to receive some bias-based policing training. What's not in there, and what I've had some conversations with outside the agency, is there's nothing specifically about racism or recognizing racism. And this has been a topic that I've had with some of the leaders in the Lancaster NAACP, that I think that this is an area of training that police could greatly benefit from. But it needs to be created. The training needs to be created and then put into effect, and probably right at the very beginning of police training from the academy on through, and then something that is done on a regular basis.
Right.
Remedial diversity training is also part of this, where we find circumstances that warrant, again, I said, an officer has multiple complaints from outside the agency. You know, if we see 2 or 3, some type of pattern, this should be addressed depending on what it is. It could be remedial training. It might warrant more than that. It might warrant days off without pay. It might warrant dismissal. It just depends on what we're talking about. Below that, you'll see our use of force statistics for the past 3 years. And you can see we started out in 2017 with 22, went down to 17, and up to 31. I've broken down the types of use of force. You'll see things in there such as hands and feet, taser usage, verbal commands. We talked about pointing a firearm. Down in 2019, there were 4 instances where a firearm was pointed at an individual. You'll see statistics in there as how many of those total numbers people were arrested, how many were injured, whether they received medical treatment or not, whether an officer was injured, whether they received medical treatment or not. Any questions?
All 3 years show an increase, Chief. You know, when you look at some of those, you know, the total, the taser, pointing the firearm, yeah, they're definitely showing an increase.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something driving that? Or are there factors in our crime statistics that are driving that?
I would be reluctant to throw out an answer that would actually cover it, but I agree it needs to be looked at as to why this is occurring. Our call volume has increased. Our types of crime have gone up over 3 years, but have they gone up significantly to adjust these kind of numbers here? And needs to be examined. Yeah.
I would encourage that, Chief. And
Yes.
It sounds like, you know, you're well aware of that. You know, it does, you know, there medical treatments, I mean, just, you know, everything there is showing that there is a greater degree of force being used.
Mm-hmm.
And so just coming to understand what that means.
So absolutely. The citizen complaints for the last 3 years are on the last page. You can see we had 1 in 17 that was unfounded. We had 4 in 18, 2 founded, or 2 sustained, 2 unfounded. The 2 sustained incidents were from inside the agency. So somebody at command level was making a complaint about officer actions. It was investigated and dealt with. and in 2019, another one from outside that was unfounded. And down below that, I have a list of things that, not saying that East Lampeter Township is going to have to consider and address all of these, but I think we're going to see police departments across the country have to answer these, and depending on where you're at, possibly more, possibly less, but publicizing the police department's policies, publicizing the police department's training, publicizing disciplinary investigations, publicizing police actions with demographics, civilian review and oversight, changes in qualified immunity is a hot topic right now, changes in required training, changes in our appearance. As you know, and I was a proponent of external vests, and they do look more militaristic. There's no two ways about it. They serve a health purpose too that I don't know if everybody understands. But when you work so many years with 20 plus pounds on your waist, to get things off of your waist and up on that vest it's healthier for the officers, and there's less back issues and less pinched nerve problems and things of that nature. But it does come at a price. It does look more militaristic. There's a trade-off. Changes in hiring practices and discipline disclosure. We've heard people already talking about the changes in hiring practice. And of course, body-worn camera programs, which I'm looking into. I have a committee working on right now, and I'd probably go out on a limb and say I would think we would move forward with a program like this before the end of the year after we've done some research.
Yeah, just a comment and a question. First of all, thank you.
Sure.
Very helpful, and love to have you come more often and have you at the front of the agenda, just like we did today, so you don't have to sit through the whole thing. In the budget, we had approved 2 positions, community service, 8 positions, right. And you're starting to hear on the news and and other writings out there that police departments have to deal with everything, right? You get a call and you walk into a domestic violence situation or something else, or maybe just not domestic violence, just 2 people that are arguing that you really don't need an officer, or you just need sort of a peacemaker to help get conversation happening between 2 parties, or just helping an individual person. And I guess my question is that those community service positions, I believe when we originally put them in the budget, were really for minor type things, to take reports. However, what I'm reading is that social workers and others could help take the burden of police officers if essentially a police officer could come in, make sure there's no one at harm, but they still have a need to handle something, so the police officer could handle other things. I guess my question is, in a long roundabout way, is should we look at maybe a different skill set of those community service positions where they could handle some of these more social aspects of policing? So that's just, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I definitely would say that there could be room for something like that, but the when and the where part and how it would be implemented would be my concern. And to your example, if you have 2 neighbors having a dispute over a property line, right. You would think that something like this would be low key enough that maybe someone with that different skill set who might have some social working background could come in and mediate something like that. And we could sit here and say 9 times out of 10, yeah, that would work. Right. But I'm already aware of one case which happened in East Lampeter Township, right, between 2 neighbors, which resulted in a shooting over, I think, property line type stuff. So it's really difficult to compartmentalize or put something like that into a category and say this is going to work and it's going to work this way every time. Mm-hmm. And I've heard that comment too about having a social worker ride along with a police officer. Could something like that work? Well, if where there's money,
sure,
You can make a lot of different things work. The problem is that you roll up on a domestic that is violent.
Right.
And that social worker, do they have any training? Do they have any means with which to protect themselves as they're getting out of the car and the officer's getting out of the car? And those are all questions that need to be asked and answered. There's just a lot of discussion that has to take place. But I'm not saying that it can't help.
Understood. Yeah, I just wanted to hear your thoughts on, what the future could bring. But
These items that are listed here, Chief, that police departments will likely face going forward, you pointed to the body cam.
Yes.
Are there any items on here that you would say are in order of priority, maybe lower hanging fruit that East Lampier's Police Department could get ahead of and start to be out there in front?
The body camera programs, I mentioned to Hutch at our weekly meeting that I think everything that is occurring in the country right now, those agencies that don't have body cameras, this is going to be a tipping point for them. If you don't see legislation demanding this type of technology to be used, certainly the responsible governors of such decisions would say, I think we need to move in this direction. So I think that the timing is at the point where, that is going to be an immediate thing that we do. I put together a committee to look at body camera technology, to look at the hardware, to look at the software, and then to examine policy from other agencies, and also the amount of time that's going to have to be invested into implement that type of program. Who's going to do the day-to-day work behind the scenes of that type of stuff. And once I have that put together, I believe I'm going to be using some of our Fund 4 money to move forward with this. We have other agencies, I believe even in Lancaster County, that are publicizing some of their department's policies. Another thing that Hutch and I spoke about, there's a trade-off here. It's a true balancing act. You can say, well, we put everything out there and then we're being as transparent as we can be. Yes, and I'm all for transparency. I'm the type of person who will run this agency as if I haven't done anything wrong, I have nothing to hide. So I'm not hiding anything. It's there and able to be viewed. But at the same time, if I put a policy out there that says, we don't have a no pursuit policy, but let's say we had a no vehicle pursuit policy, and now it's out there and it's online, and anybody and their brother can read it on their smartphone. Well, now they know, well, East Lampeter doesn't have pursuit. They have the zero tolerance pursuit policy. So I know if I run fast enough, they're going to stop chasing me, and I'll likely get away. That can work to the negative, obviously, and similarly with possibly other policies. So there is a balancing act there, but I'm not afraid of putting any of our policies out there. I just want to think it through as to, how much the good outweighs the bad, so to speak. There's no issues with publicizing training. Right now, there would be issues with publicizing disciplinary investigations because we have an officer bill of rights and they have a contract. And this is another topic that is a real buzz right now. And we may be looking in the near future that these things aren't allowed to be included in contracts. And that's just something we're going to have to deal with if that comes down the pike.
No, I see that. The civilian review and oversight, I firmly believe that's what we are about. We are the civilians. We just heard from, 15 citizens who were talking to us about an issue related to land use, and they spoke to us through Zoom, and they spoke to us by being in public here, and they're asking us to represent their interests. And so I consider us to be that. There are some things that, I believe are part of the practices that perhaps we just don't necessarily look to and raise up to actually talk about these things in ways that we should. So that's one of them. Publicizing police action demographics. Each year we get a police report and we hear what's happening. putting that out to the public as well too on the website, or, letting the public know, here's what's happening in the community around you.
We're moving forward with that as we speak.
Good, good.
That can get broken down even further, though. We don't keep track of the demographic of every vehicle stop. We can. It's going to take more time. But right now, an officer documents that they made a vehicle stop, so but we don't know whether it was unless they issue a citation. If they just give a warning, we don't know if it was a male or a female or an African American or a Spanish person or.
Yeah. One item there that I'd like to speak to, if I could.
Yeah, sure, please.
One more time, Steve. Number 8, the psychology of policing is something that, I know, enough to make a statement on, but you live it, Chief, every day, so, the appearance and the optics that are being, transmitted to the public I'm assuming, can deter crime. Can keep people from doing certain things. But I just know it seems like since 9/11, the amount of military surplus that it's made its way into even the smallest police departments. It seems as though it has raised the level of I guess militarization. You mentioned the vest. Even our vehicles, at times can come across, looking beefy and intimidating. And once again, I'm sure that the psychology of that is there. But just recognizing it, there is a level of intimidation that does come across to the public, and I don't know where the balance is.
Yeah, I think in our agency, where that weighs in the biggest is our external vest carriers. They are paramilitary in their look. They use a system called Molly, which allows officers, it's a universal way with which officers can attach a multitude of things to their vest. And again, I express the interest in the health benefits of doing so, because the weight of everything now is being borne by your shoulders rather than so much by your waist. So there are health benefits with it. There's other ways around that. Oh, I shouldn't say that. There's other external vest carriers which look like a uniform shirt. It still puts their vest on the outside, which most people would say is more comfortable to be worn that way, but it doesn't incorporate the Molly system then. So now you're still back to carrying everything that you need for the job on your belt rather than up on your vest. So I haven't seen anything else that kind of softens the edge of our appearance, which you mentioned the cars, but the officer, when you're face to face with the person, and that's I think where the biggest gains can be made. But I'm not advocating that we do away with our external carriers. I just not sure where the middle ground would be exactly. But as far as military equipment, you're right. When I started this job, we had a pistol and we had a shotgun, and now we have rifles and pistols and shotguns and tasers. But we also have crime that I wouldn't have dreamed of occurring back then either. So, and we have people going in and shooting schools. So it'd be very difficult to expect someone to overcome that kind of a threat with just a pistol. If they didn't have a long gun available to them, they're not going to get very far in trying to shut that threat down. So, again, I understand that the public sees these things possibly one way versus another. And I agree that there's explanations for things and discussions that need to be had, and we can meet in the middle is the point, I guess, that I wish to make.
I have one question.
Yeah, sure.
I've done several ride-alongs with our officers, and I've seen them use very well de-escalation techniques. How often are those trained or provided as training for officers, and is it a requirement, and how often?
So we've had a couple different de-escalation type trainings. We used to have something that we sent the guys to, and I'm going to draw a blank on it, what the name of it is right now, but we haven't sent the most recent hires to that class. So out of 38 officers, there's probably 7 to 8 that haven't attended. At the same time, I'm not aware that I've been seeing it as frequently. Now, crisis intervention team training is something that's very popular in Lancaster County right now, and we have an awful lot of officers that have gone through it. It's not something that we have forced on all of our officers, though. At this point, it's been, hey, we have a class coming up, who would like to go? And most of the guys want to go, so many of them have been through, but not everybody has been through. And while that's dealing with people in crisis specifically, it does also represent a certain amount of training for de-escalation. But de-escalation training is something that we could be doing more frequently, and ought to be doing more frequently. I just need to find what we would be using in order to incorporate that annually.
Yeah, I went through the SPA, Safe and Positive Approaches, which is a de-escalation, and so I'm certified as a safety holder, so I can engage. But it was a very helpful training of how to de-escalate without ever getting to that point. And there's lots of techniques which I've seen our officers do in real life. But going through the training was very helpful to me, just to see, there's a lot of different ways that you can actually de-escalate without having to get even very close. So something to consider.
I think a lot of times de-escalation boils down to a mindset where the officer shows up and, I was always taught, if you can talk your way out of every situation, talk your way out of it.
Right.
Not everybody is brought up the same way. They'll talk for a little while, and then they'll say, okay, I'm done talking now. And I'm going to act. And I think that's something where, as law enforcement across the board, if we can continue dialogue and bring a situation to a close without having to lay hands on somebody and getting somebody to come along peacefully, we need to do that as often, as frequently as we possibly can.
Makes sense. Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Any questions from the public? Yeah, if you do have a question, you would unmute yourself, and then you'd be able to ask a question. Okay. Thank you, Chief. Thanks again.
Sure.
We'll go to the next agenda item, 6A, time extension for township review and action for Devon Creek Phase 2, Plan 1538. They were just in front of us, and they've given us additional time to December 22nd, 2020 for township review.
Right. This is related to the land development plan for the next phase. So that's been delayed as a result of the ongoing conditional use process.
Yep.
So, they need,
Additional time.
additional
They're giving
time
us
to get
additional-
through the process.
Yeah, understood. Okay.
Make a motion that we accept the time extension to December 22nd, 2020.
Motion was made by Dave.
Second.
Second by John. Any comments from the board? Public? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Okay, we have a request for time extension to record conditionally approved plan 1625 Krills Meadowview Drive. Heard this one before.
This has been before the board a number of times before. The remaining issue here before it can be recorded is the posting of financial security for the required improvements. And we explored a number of different possible solutions to this, and we haven't been able to find one that the Krills can satisfy. So they're asking for significant amount of time into next year to satisfy this. And there are liens on the property, so there are things that would have to be satisfied in order to resolve those before they could get financial security in place. So I'm skeptical, quite honestly, that they're going to be able to resolve this. But if the board's inclined to provide another extension, I'd recommend that it be clear that this would be the last one.
Consequences of denying and then coming back.
Right, they'd have to start the process all over again through the subdivision plan process.
Is there anyone here for this item on the phone? Okay.
When did
Oh,
we
gosh.
first,
It's probably when I first got on the board.
This is a 2016 plan.
2016?
This competes with the car wash.
Let's compete with the car wash.
This does compete with the car wash.
So they'd have to start it over again.
Correct, I mean, the things that would be on the plan might not be very different as long as the ordinance hasn't changed, which I don't think would have applied to this location. So there'd be an application fee and, you know, processing time and all of that would go along with it to process another plan. But yes, that's what would happen.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be in favor of approving it, but this is the last extension for the plan. I mean,
What is the total amount for the financial security? Do you know, Mr. Chairman?
I don't know.
It's in the $20,000 range, I believe.
You said there's liens on the property as well that they would
There
have to.
are.
What's the fee to start the application process fresh?
Right.
And then there's eventually but eventually there's still the financial security. Like if they started over again,
Right.
they're still going to come back to this issue with the financial security.
And at this point, essentially, these are pieces of paper sitting in an office, essentially. I mean, it's not like is there work that's happening from a township level if we extend it a year, okay? What additional work is there during that 365 days from today till then?
There really isn't much. We just have to track it. We have to
Right.
make
So
sure
just
that we
track
don't lose track of it and that doesn't
Yeah.
get into a deemed approval kind of situation.
So I have been writing these time extensions that if there is no recreation plan, the plan is denied.
Okay. So if for some for unforeseen reason, we do not recall this, it's denied. So even if we forget to bring it up, it's denied. That works.
John's thinking.
No.
Make a motion to give them another 12-month time extension.
Second.
Okay. Motion made, second.
Uh,
A motion.
Considering it's the last.
Yes.
Yes.
Make
Yeah.
that
That I was
clear.
sorry.
I'll second
So,
that.
yeah. So motion was made, 12 months, last final extension. This being the final extension. Second by Dave. Any other comments from the board? Any other comments from the public? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. C, request for time extension to record conditionally approved plan 1922 High Associates, Ben Franklin Boulevard.
This is one you just recently had
Yeah.
through the process. They've been working on satisfying all of the conditions of approval and just need a little bit more time into August to get everything done.
This was originally called the Zuki Garage plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're all there.
Yep.
The applicant has specifically asked, because there's a specific developer's agreement with conditions in it, that you reaffirm conditions.
There's essentially a name change. We're reaffirming those decisions. Okay.
Make a motion that we grant the time extension to record the conditionally approved plan number 1922 High Associates Ben Franklin Boulevard to August 29th, 2020.
Okay. Do you want that language reaffirming? Yeah, the language reaffirming the prior. How would you like?
In the center of the paragraph
Okay,
here,
yeah.
it addresses it under A, says reaffirm the conditional approval as reflected.
You're good, Dave. Hold on.
You can also, based on the letter.
My motion would reaffirm the conditional approval as reflected in the East Lampeter Township letter, and then grant the extension to August 29th, 2020.
Okay, understood. Motion made by John,
Second?
second by Dave. Any other comments from board members? Any comments from the public?
I think Ken was on.
Well, Ken's on probably for the stormwater management business walking trail. Any comments from the public? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. D, ordinance amendments regarding the transient retail business and food trucks. Ash, do you want to give background?
Sure. Based upon the board's discussion at your last meeting, I believe, in May, we worked with the township solicitor to draft some changes, again, based upon the input and direction from the board. It has been advertised, so you can act on it tonight if you are ready and wish to do that. It not necessarily, you don't have to if you don't want to. There is time that since it's been advertised, you could act at your next meeting if you prefer. But if there are any substantial changes from what's been advertised, then we would have to re-advertise it.
And the fee schedule for anything that is handled by resolution, so that does not have to go through the
Correct.
process.
Yeah, the resolutions don't need to be advertised or anything.
Yeah.
We made copies of those just so you have that information as you're considering this.
Yeah. And, the whole reason I brought this up, I think many are aware, and Lynn wrote about it in the newspaper. I've been getting requests from neighbors looking to, have a fun way of getting out of their house and getting dinner or lunch from a food truck that might be parking in a residential neighborhood. We've actually had a few park right outside our neighborhood in West Lampeter over the last couple of weeks or so. And they've followed CDC guidelines. They've followed, all Department of Health safety protocols. Frankly, the vendors, you order in advance, and then you're told, you pick up your, burger at 5:30, and you go up and pick it up, and you're on your way. It's not like a typical food truck where you walk up to the food truck and order whatever's on the menu. At least that's what I'm seeing as a new trend for these food trucks to keep people, separated essentially by getting pickup times at different times.
They're not putting out little cafe tables and
No.
things like that. Encourage people
Right.
to hang.
Right. Yeah.
I think perhaps maybe contrary to maybe something I said during the last meeting is the impact of the zoning ordinance. And in this case, my understanding from the solicitor is that we wouldn't need to change anything about the zoning ordinance to permit them on township streets through
Okay.
this ordinance.
Got it. So if it's in Southridge Farm, R2, I think, yeah, it should be R2. There's nothing, it's on a township street, it's okay to be there. Of course.
It would be governed by the
this
provisions
ordinance.
of this ordinance, yes.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. Questions from board members on the ordinance?
Well, since Chief is here, I have questions for him.
Yeah.
You're probably familiar with this. How often do our officers use this as a deterrent tool or a tool in your tool belt? This entire transient business license ordinance.
Less so with the trucks and the fireworks stands or any other type of seasonal flowers at Mother's Day. It would be more frequently with the door-to-door type people.
Yes.
Although we had less of that last year than we've had in a while, so but we get if I said we had a half a dozen residents call throughout the summer months about somebody coming door to door to solicit something, I would say that probably would about paint the picture for you about how frequently that's happening in terms of complaints, and then making sure that they have in fact filed for a transient license and gone through the checks and balances of that. So I would say probably half of those have not. So it is something that we use. It's not something that they use frequently.
Has anyone been prosecuted with this?
Not that I can remember recently. I can't remember one recently.
Other questions about the ordinance? Okay, any comments from staff about it? Thanks for the zoning. I was going to ask that, so thanks for bringing that up. Okay.
No.
Okay, I'll accept the motion, then I'll ask for comments from the public as well.
I didn't have a chance to
Oh, okay.
review it. According to the old one, it reads pretty, from my memory, it reads pretty similar, but what changed? Is there like a summary of what we changed?
Yeah, the section.
I don't recall section by section, but essentially, under certain standard requirements, they would be permitted within, to be conducted on township streets. The limitations are, I think they start on section 5, starting on page 4 of the document. Time frame when they can conduct these activities. Okay, section 7, which is on page 6. Yeah, I'm sorry. This is where most of the changes were specifying the location of the vehicle.
Clean
things,
up.
clean up,
Yeah.
things to, avoid, fire hydrants and fire escapes, not in the median strip of divided highway and those sorts of provisions.
Not in front of a restaurant.
Right.
It's still under the jurisdiction of the police department to, if they're in a dangerous place or not following the rules, it's essentially their enforcement.
Right. If they would see something that would be of concern to them,
Yeah.
they'd be able to address it.
Should we amend the section that says any honorably discharged soldier, sailor, Marine to include the Air Force and maybe Space Force?
I'm for the Space Force, but not the.
Not going to be coming around recruiting.
Which is a registered trademark of Netflix.
Are you making a suggestion? You're fine with it?
I'm fine with this.
I think the intent of the military.
I mean, my statement from the previous meeting still stands. Loosening this up, I'm supportive, but I think we could eliminate the entire ordinance altogether.
Save that discussion for another meeting. At this point, I'd be happy to, I think my neighbors would be happy to have the food vendors allowed.
This
So,
addresses the issues that you were
yes,
thinking of.
yeah, yes.
Quite honestly, I think without having this ordinance in place and a food vendor setting up on a township street somewhere, we'd probably have difficulty with that. We'd find some other reason, some
Right.
other requirement that would say you can't be there.
Right.
If we didn't have these provisions in the ordinance that allow them.
Be the Wild West of West Lampeter.
Okay, I'm looking for a
I'll
motion.
make a motion that we approve the ordinance. Amendments to the transient retail business food trucks as presented.
Okay.
Should the fee schedule be?
Actually, I think we're going to take that as a separate.
Separate item?
Yeah, separate item, although it's on our agenda. Is it okay if we take it, we'll have a discussion in a separate item, or?
I mean, that resolution was already adopted by the board, so unless there's something about the information on that resolution that you want to change, you don't need to take any action on it at all.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the points that I had made during the discussion in the first meeting was to, make it as, actually, I'm sorry, the fee was like $50. Yeah, I'm fine with keeping that. Yeah.
The motion stands?
Second. Motion made. You said second? Or no, you made the motion.
I made the motion, please.
Dave made second. Okay, any other comments from the board? Comments from the public? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Okay. 7, new business. Esch Stormwater Management Plan 2006, 2090 Creek Hill Road. And who's?
You guys see and hear me okay?
We can.
Gotcha.
Hey, this is Kevin Whitmire with Impact Engineering Group. Try to share my screen here with you guys, see if it works.
Give your right mouse click on him, right?
See that?
Yeah, we can see it.
All right. So this is the Isaac S. Esch Stormwater Management Plan. Subject property is an 11.5 acre property located at 2090 Creek Hill Road. Before you is the existing conditions plan. As you can see, there's an existing driveway that comes off the south side of Creek Hill Road, winds back to an existing dwelling and a greenhouse. So these improvements were constructed under a stormwater management plan approved back in 2015. However, tying into this plan, the greenhouse was not shown on that prior plan. Instead, there was a barn that I'll show you in a second that was proposed. So getting back, if you look at the existing condition plans from the road to the dwelling, all the stormwater BMPs that were proposed under that original plan were constructed. There's a stormwater basin out here along the driveway near the road, and then there's also another stormwater infiltration basin here once the driveway bends to the east. So now to jump to the proposed conditions, can see this barn that is shown as proposed to be constructed under this plan was originally proposed to be constructed on the 2015 stormwater plan. Like I said, the greenhouse was constructed instead. So the prior plan also included an underground stormwater bed to control the runoff from the proposed barn. However, since the greenhouse was constructed and now the barn is being constructed in addition, this stormwater bed is now proposed, is sized to handle all of the improvements, basically northeast of the dwelling. So that's this paving, the existing paving leading to the greenhouse itself, the paving expansion associated with the new barn, and the new barn itself. As far as where we're at in the process, we received a review letter from David Miller Associates on May 20th. I assume you have that in front of you.
We do.
Okay. There's quite a few comments in it. Usually before I come before you guys. I'd like to have a little bit shorter of a letter, but as far as what's contained in the letter, there's really no major issues that need to be addressed. There's 2 zoning comments I need to discuss with Tara a little bit. That's basically just clarifying the use of the property. There's no issue with any type of conflict that would require any relief, but for the purpose of accurately documenting the use in the property, we'll need to talk about that a little bit. And as far as all the stormwater comments are concerned, we can address those with no waivers required. So I'm confident that we can clean this all up and satisfy this review letter, in short time. The reason we haven't addressed the letter yet is we're waiting for the Conservation District review. We want to do those concurrently, so we're not, duplicating any effort as part of their review process. So, do you have any questions about the plan or any of the comments in the review letter specifically?
Board, any comments or questions? I mean, look, like I said, it's multiple pages, but it looks like it's, again, no waivers, no modifications. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. Any questions from the board? Okay. Well, I will accept the motion.
Make a motion that we approve the Ash Stormwater Management Plan 20-06 for 2090 Creek Hill Road, conditioned on David Miller's letter dated May 20, 2020, and that any zoning issues will be resolved working with staff.
Second. Okay. Motion made by Dave, second by Ethan. Okay. Any other comments from the board? Any comments from the public? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Kevin, you too.
We have B, Greenfield Stormwater Management Plan 2008, Business Park Walking Trail. Thanks for sitting through. You can go whenever you're ready.
Essentially what this project is doing, expanding their pedestrian trail network, their sidewalks, trails for some of those. That's really the purpose of the plan. Continue with pedestrian access for the entire community.
Awesome.
We submitted a stormwater management plan to the township. We have one learning campaign on Friday. All having particular issues with any of the comments. One thing I will note, we had originally requested a waiver of the plan development process. Discussions with staff, that's not needed. So I'd like to move forward to withdraw that. We can provide a letter to the
Okay.
council.
Can we make our motion based on that form withdrawal coming soon? Okay. Yeah, I mean, great. Thanks for putting sidewalks in. Awesome. Usually we're fighting with people to get sidewalks in, and you're coming to us to put sidewalks in. They're a community. That's awesome.
Pretty straightforward
Yep.
plan. You have to answer the questions that they will represent higher.
Yep.
Soon call there as well.
Any questions from board? Looks like a pretty straightforward letter as well. Okay.
How many miles of sidewalk?
Yeah, I was going to say.
I don't know how many miles, it's about 72,000 square feet.
Lineal feet or square feet?
Square feet, yeah. I'm not sure how many.
Well, it wouldn't be 72,000, obviously, yeah.
You gotta go all the way up Greenfield up to Willow. See that on the east side.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, just from Ben Franklin.
For Ben Franklin, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, thank
Well,
Nice feature.
It's a fantastic trail system. I've used it plenty of times.
yeah,
you.
definitely.
Good, no, it's very good.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, sure.
just one thing
Yeah, sure.
I want to make sure is clear that, this is really an effort to link sort of the existing part of the park
Right.
to the new part of the park.
Yep.
So I just want to make sure that it's understood that these will be continuous. There will be necessary footbridges to go through floodplain areas and in order to make it continuous and completely link.
Correct, and there's certain permitting associated with it.
So that'll be to come yet before they can be built.
Are there certain areas of the plan, Hutch, that in particular that you were, the waterways, is that where you're?
Through those floodplain areas,
Yeah.
it wasn't, at least initially, it wasn't very clear to me that, the footbridges were going to be in there to
Right.
make sure it linked up and was
Yeah.
continuous.
Mhm.
There is a section out along Colonial Village as you get close to Willow where to me, there's a gap where there's a culvert. And the solution is to have pedestrians walk in the street in that area. I'm not sure that's the best solution, but that's the solution that's been offered. So, it's a fantastic, system, and
Right.
don't want to diminish that in any way, but I just want
Yeah.
to make sure that what they're doing is making it continuous and linked up in all respects.
Any other comments to that, Ken Hornbeck, or anyone else?
No, we have no further comments or input other than what the DMA letter says.
Okay. Accept a motion.
I make a motion that we approve the stormwater management plan for 20-08 for Business Park Walking Trail, conditioned on David Miller letter, with the exception that we'll receive a letter withdrawing the waiver request for final land development plan, and also conditioned on the trail system being continuous, connecting and providing any kind of bridges, et cetera, over floodplain areas, that type of thing.
Second?
Made. Second. Any other comments from the board? Any other comments from the public, the applicant? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Thanks again.
Hey, thank you.
I can't wait to use it. Okay.
Greenfield Business Park, aren't we calling it the Business Park? Is that the corporate center? Right? Business Park.
I don't know what the name is, but that's our zoning.
That's our zoning.
That's our
Yeah,
zoning
yeah.
term.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we have C, Wenger, Stormwater Management Plan 2009, Hobson Road.
Hi, Steve Gergley, Harbor Engineering.
Hey, Steve.
Hi, Steve.
Try to share my screen here if you guys can see it. Can everyone see my screen?
Looks
Yes.
good.
Okay, great. Yep. So this is a stormwater management plan for a gentleman named Larry Wenger. He recently purchased a 0.6 acre property on the south side of Hobson Road. It's just east of your township park on Hobson Road. It's a vacant lot. Essentially just wants to build a home and a driveway zoned appropriately. It has public sewer, on-lot well, and for stormwater management, we're proposing an underground stone seepage pit with a small retentive grading area on top of that. Relatively straightforward, less than 1 acre of earth disturbance, no NPDES permit. We did receive a letter from David Miller's office just the other day. We have no issues with any of their comments. I spoke with Tara about some of the zoning comments. I think we have no issues there either. and we're not asking for any modifications.
Okay. Any questions from board members? Okay. Any comments from staff? Okay. I can't tell looking at your eyes. Thought there was something. Okay. Okay, I'll accept the motion.
Make a motion that we approve the stormwater management plan for Larry Wanger, review number 1, Hobson Road, per the David Miller letter dated June 12, 2020.
Okay, motion made.
Second.
Second by Dave. Any other comments from board members? Comments from the public? Appears to be Steve and Lynn at this point. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you, Steve.
Hey, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Steve.
It'll be good to see that lot. Okay, we have, lost my agenda along the way. We have 8 action items. Renewal of disaster declaration regarding COVID-19.
I put this on the agenda because the declaration that the board made back in March is expiring. It's completely up to the board whether you want to continue it or not. There's I guess from my perspective, there's reasons to continue it. There are also reasons to let it expire. There's no risk in my view that the township would become ineligible for any of the funding that's going to be available if it does expire. You know, up to you how you feel about whether or not continuation is the appropriate action.
And if we did let it expire and we then decided, let's just say it's July 1st and something happens and we need to have a disaster declaration, we could redo it at that time as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at staff for guidance on this. I don't know. I mean, I know it allows us to more quickly do certain things, but I'm not sure we're in that, still in that need of purchasing supplies on a, instantaneously. I mean,
right. And even under the current one, we didn't have to invoke any of these sort of emergency purchasing requirements. Right. The purchasing that we were doing for supplies were all within the requirements below the thresholds that require bidding.
Sure.
Anyway, so,
Yeah.
And all our staff are now back working,
Right.
so it doesn't require any changes. So I see no
I'd let it
benefit in
expire.
continuing it at this point.
Yeah. So,
I think it sends a message.
yeah, sure. We're ready to move forward. Okay. So sounds like on June 16th, it will expire. And if we need it at some certain point, please let us know and we'll do what we need to do.
we will do that.
Okay. B, ordinance for a stop sign on Della Road at Pleasant Drive.
Township staff became aware of this, within the last 6 weeks or so. It's a location that is a T intersection.
Right.
Actually, there's 2 ends of
Right.
Della Road that touch on Pleasant, and the one which is Della going eastbound has a stop sign.
Mhm.
At the other end, which is Della going
Right.
southbound,
Right.
does not have a stop sign. So it's a T intersection, and it really should have a stop
Yeah.
sign there to control traffic. I'm not aware that we've had
Right.
accidents there
Right.
of any sort, but if there would be a liability concern that the township would have.
Yeah. I mean, just based on there's no outlet there, right? So it's either people that shouldn't be there but yeah, it makes total sense. I looked at it on Google Maps and it's kind of crazy. I guess if 2 cars came at the same time, one should stop, but
There are 3 houses that are there.
Yeah,
it's-
I know, but
You know,
hey, there's people delivering, there's UPS drivers, there's people delivering stuff, it makes sense to put a stop sign there, clearly. Okay, so we have an ordinance to put a stop sign on Della Road at Pleasant Drive in the direction of travel going south.
Make a motion to adopt a resolution for a stop sign at Della Road at Pleasant Drive.
Is it an ordinance, I guess?
It's an ordinance.
It
Yeah,
is,
ordinance, sorry. Yep, I think I said resolution. Okay, so ordinance approving the stop sign from Dave.
Second.
Second by Ethan. Any other comments from the board? Any other comments from the public? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Okay. C, we have a resolution regarding the Stevie Region Park Recreation Open Space Plan acceptance.
Yes, we're nearing the end of the process, and one of the grant requirements is that there be a resolution adopted closing out the grant project. So the document has been prepared, it's been circulated. We have sent this on to the school district as well as Upper Laycock Township, who also participated directly in helping to fund the planning effort. And so we've asked them to adopt similar resolutions, which I believe the school district's doing at their meeting tonight, and Upper Laycock later this week. So this will help us close it out. It'll make us eligible to receive the final payment of the grant, which helped fund it from DCNR. And then hopefully shortly thereafter, we can start to move on and towards implementation, and hoping to work with all three townships in the CV region.
And the school district.
And the school district, of course, yeah.
Great. Okay. We have a resolution to close out the Community Conservation Partnership Grant Project.
Make a motion to approve the resolution regarding CV Regional Park Recreation Open Space Plan.
Second.
Motion made, second by John. Any other comments from the board? Any other comments from the public? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay. We have authorized legal Tara. Review of recommended zoning ordinance amendments and hearing date schedule.
Right, so I've got, a few pages worth of changes here.
Do.
I'm not going to go through every single one, if that's okay. I'm going to summarize a couple of them. The zoning hearing board members have asked for consideration of tourist home and requiring someone to stay within the tourist home while not rented. So basically a tenant or an owner. This is something that we talked about extensively at our work sessions when we went through the 2016 adoption, and we said no one needs to live there. So the zoning hearing board's concern is that they've seen a number of these come through a special exception in varying zoning districts, and they see it as vacant property that's just sitting there when it's not rented. So not that something has to be done here. These are just what was asked.
Another alternative way to solve this is just make it by right instead of special exception, and they won't see it.
The next item is kennel size. We have seen 2 kennels come through the zoning hearing board at a fairly substantial size, 5,000 square feet for the one, and I believe 7,500 square feet for another. The maximum in the ordinance is 10,000 square feet. So they have requested a consideration for lowering that to 3,000 square feet. Now we have had one that has come in with a center walk aisle with kennel sections on either side and then runs beyond that. So if they can get large. Now they don't want to consider doggy daycare facilities as part of the kennel operation, but they do want to consider lowering that overall size or allowance. And then the next one is the 500-foot buffer from a property line. We have a number of kennels that are on a farm, They're distance away from both neighbors and property lines and street right-of-ways. And so then we have a dwelling, then that needs buffering from the kennel on the same property.
So it's like the owner's house
Right.
needs to be buffered from their business.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, the next one we've seen in every single amendment that's come before you. It's asked of all the time by business owners, and that's for those in the event of damage and only allowing 50% for non-conforming signs to be replaced. Now, this would also include billboards along Route 30.
Mm.
So that one will most likely stay on my list.
Yes.
In talking with High Associates, they are working with a farmer that is looking to have a farm market. Now, our definition currently requires 2 or more vendors at a farm market, not just one. If you have one vendor, it's a farm stand. Well, there's no farm to have a farm stand.
Mm.
So they'd like to have a retail area that is a tent or outdoor market with a farmer that they're working with in the near future. So those 2 articles would be amended to address that.
All right.
Mhm.
In working through the Route 340 corridor study with Lake Hawk Township and Salisbury Township, I did a pretty extensive review of Lake Hawk Township C1 district and our Bird and Hand district. Now, if you recall, our Bird and Hand district allows all of the uses by right if they follow the architectural guidelines.
Right.
They don't follow the architectural guidelines, it goes straight to conditional use. So there are a number of uses that Lake Hawk Township allows that we do not. One, which you'll see later as well, is municipal buildings and fire stations. Anything that is for the public. That's something we should absolutely consider. The next is nursery and garden centers by right within the district with size limitations. Now, their thoughts were more of like a Kennedy Garden type of facility rather than a Home Depot.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
They have places of worship and schools as special exceptions. So we said we can consider whether or not they're special exception or by right. Right now, they're by right for us. But this is one that we could go in either direction. Really, the intent here is to have similar uses with similar requirements in that general area because no one really knows that Ronks Road separates them.
Right.
And it's not even really Ronks Road, it's that little stream right at Bird and Hand Bakery.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Actually, it goes. Yeah.
And then theaters and auditoriums are by special exception in C1 district over in Lake Hawk Township. Now, the theater is not currently in our township. The theater is in Lake Hawk.
Right. Yep.
And then they require conditional use for restaurants over 250 seats. We don't because we let the land govern how large the restaurant can be based on the parking requirements, the stormwater requirements, and so forth. We do govern whether it's BYOB and whether there's drive. So after going through the comprehensive plan reviews, which you all saw last time, we found a few things that should be considered. Municipal uses in each district and allowing them by right. Adding a maximum height for extended stay hotels. This is something that came up with 2205 Lincoln Highway. Right now, if you put a barn in front of a house, you need to go to the zoning hearing board. You have to stay 15 feet away behind the front facade of the dwelling. We have just drive around. We have so many farms that have the barns out in front.
Right.
The heifer paddock on the right side, the barn on the left side. You've got your milking barn then, and you come through to the back, and there's the house, right? So this is something that we've seen continuously before the zoning hearing board, and the way farms are set up, it makes sense. We'd like to remove section 1803.C1. This was a leftover that was not removed by mistake in the last go around. It was in that last go around to be removed, but when we got these new ones got started on the zoning ordinance when I came on board 7 years ago, the zoning ordinance referenced personal gardens.
Personal gardens.
So we tried to remove every reference to personal gardens, and it seems we've missed one.
And where actually is that in that section? Where is it?
220.
Yeah, I know, but like, what is that in? Is it like an R2?
General
Oh,
regulation.
general regulations. Oh, gosh. Okay.
You'd
Oh,
be
boy.
surprised how many areas still regulate personal gardens.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Like, please. Do it. Yeah.
As
Grow-
you all
grow
may be aware,
veggies.
we had an issue with agricultural livestock fencing in the ag zoning district. It
Mhm.
can't be within the front yard. It can't be
Right.
more than 4 feet high. It has to be set back 10 feet from the right of way. When you're dealing with a smaller area that doesn't need much livestock grazing area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We would like to eliminate the requirement for the property owner to run a business when it's a mixed-use building. So this is where we have a commercial use on the bottom floor, and we allow 2 apartments at the top.
Right.
But the ordinance states that you have to be the business owner as well. So we want to eliminate that.
You have to be the business owner. Interesting.
To occupy one of the apartments.
No, to have the apartment,
Have the
you have to be the business owner.
I see.
Yeah.
So there's some typos that need to be addressed. And then through the Route 30 streetscape plan, RTA, said we really could use advertising.
Some revenue.
Transit stop.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a shot at it, and we think that this is one of the options that we could live with because it keeps open the side of the transit
put some in the
stop
back.
as you're approaching
Yeah.
on the bus, and allows for advertising on the other 2 sides. So the rear and then the other
The far side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So High Associates came through with a 0 side yard for manufactured homes because of a new design that's come out in the marketplace. And that was approved by the zoning hearing board, and it's something that we think we may see more of, so we'd like to put that in the
Mm-hmm.
On that note, there is a new type of modular home that is vertical. So they're stacking modulars. Pittsburgh just started using those. It's really fascinating. So you can start with a 500 square foot house, and then you expand
Add on to
up. You can add up to 3 or 4 floors. So as your family grows, or you want to add an apartment, and they literally bring in a crane, pull off the roof, set the new block on, put the roof back on, and you're done. So that might be like shipping containers.
Yeah.
But it looks really nice. So they have whole neighborhoods like that. So you start with what you can afford and you expand vertically. So it might be something to look at to make sure could be used, especially in manufactured home parks or similar. It's fascinating stuff.
NRP Mod Logic, New Holland, builds those huge. I mean, it's truly, it's becoming a very attractive way of building up.
Again, typos, and then in the design guidelines for Birmingham, we want to remove any reference to sidewalks and curbing. That's taken care of in our Salvo ordinance, and as you might recall, Nate's Auto came through recently. They had to go to both the zoning hearing board and you all ask for a deferral for those and get a variance from the zoning hearing board. So the last 2, one is separating grade and high school from technical and colleges. So they're allowed currently in industrial zones in the business park. And we just think that there could be different definitions for them. There's obviously a different age group that's going to these various schools, but we do have schools lumped all together right now. And where they're allowed, it's lumped together as well. And then we had the food truck in there until we had the decision from the township.
Got it.
So,
Okay. Would you like direction on what was it, the second page where the Birmingham Village? I felt like there was some question there that you had just around, yeah, some of these make sense to add in, maybe some may not make sense to be consistent.
I would
We are willing to give direction. I mean, honestly, I think almost everything that you said, I was in complete agreement with. My only comments on the bird in hand, let me just go back to it. I just sort of made a mental note. I totally agree with one, consider allowing municipal buildings, firehouses right within the district by right. I agree with the nursery and garden centers. I also agree with the comments you made. We're not talking about Lowe's and Home Depots. We're talking about, local, smaller type things. So if I understood you correctly, for the consider place of worship in schools by special exception, right now we actually have it by right. Yeah, I would keep that. That's one that I personally would think.
Agreed.
Keep it by right. So, David, John, do you? I mean,
there's a size.
well, you're going to be limited
By parking and stormwater,
By parking and
Yeah,
stormwater.
right.
There you go.
preferably
And
eliminate
this
parking.
this is in the village. This is in the Bird in Hand Village District.
That's correct.
You're very limited, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And then this would be especially true, we make this grade and high school and not
And that comes up
technical and.
later
Right.
when which I agree with as well. We should.
Yeah, I don't think UPenn is expanding the bird.
Unless
So
they
if
drill a
I
well.
understood you correctly, theaters and auditoriums are already by right within the district. Is that true?
Theaters and auditoriums are not in the district.
Okay. Then I would be okay with special exception in the district to be consistent. And then lastly, consider restaurants over 250 seats by condition. So you're saying basically this is handled
We control that same.
by zoning storm, or size.
Yeah, we don't have a seat limitation.
Yeah, and I would agree not to.
Yeah, no need to add it.
I don't recall any sort of other issues with what you had. Yeah, I think I was fine with everything else.
When was the last time we did a sort of a larger submission like this?
2019.
Yeah. I mean, this process I like. I mean, my recommendation, which I've made before, is we should do this quarterly and have a shorter list each time. But getting those so in other words, as we get these, but I think the goal should be to keep our zoning ordinance as up to date as possible so that we never have to go through a wholesale rewrite like we did before. So that means and that keeps us all fresh and familiar with the things.
Yeah.
I've got a list of things that's about this long that I'd love to sit down or Zoom and go through and add to this. So I keep notes as we go along of basically it's the waivers and special exceptions that we always give. Let's just make it so you can do them without having to come in and ask for a waiver. Unless which we need to update as well. But I also have a list that I keep track of different zoning amendments as I go through and talk to people that they're all just little things. So it's not worth like having a big meeting going through that one thing. But if we're looking at it regularly, we could go through and add 3 or 4 in there and review them. So I've got a bunch more I'd love to add.
Yeah, certainly, send them in or whatever. Let us know at a meeting and anytime you want to. I think trying to do the process that, we have to notify our planning partners, go through all of that, to try to do that on a quarterly basis would just drive us all nuts.
Or at least have a set time when we do it, whether it's twice a year or once a year. That's like, we know that on this date, or 2 times a year, as opposed to sort of we come into me, it's like, oh, we're looking at zoning. Good. But it's we've already had a bunch of conversations up to this point leading up to this that we could be pulled into at least, as opposed to saying, all right, now let's delay it and get out another round of feedback. So knowing that there's a date when we look at our zoning, just like a date that we looked at our budget, means that I can hold all those until said date.
I would say even when you have them, send them. I mean, it sounds like the items you're going to bring up are things that we've already,
I got a couple zingers for you.
Okay, so maybe I
A
don't.
bunch of those ones, but you get into accessory commercial units, we'll have probably a deeper conversation.
So how would you like the process to work, Carrie? Just Ethan emailing you, or you guys having a conversation?
Either way.
Yeah. Okay. So please do that, Ethan, and then we can then have a public discussion about to give direction on those, and then of course, put dates out there. It sounds like you are looking to look for hearing dates for these items. If Ethan would send you a list of items tomorrow, I'm assuming those could get into, like, this is really just, you were trying to get some feedback from us, correct? Which I think we gave you, and set a date. Is that correct? Okay.
What's the minimum advertised time it has to be out? What's the advertised time requirement?
The review process is 45 days. And then we've got to advertise. So that's almost a month of time in addition for the advertising.
Yeah, so I can work on some stuff this week to get those. But yeah, as soon as then we can add 45, add 30.
So I guess based on that, we'd be looking at a hearing date in August, probably.
Good.
Sounds good.
Second meeting in August.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay. Any other, at some point, I do want to talk about the stormwater exemption. Do you want to, what else do we have on the agenda here?
We can add that to the list.
Cable TV.
Yeah, sure. Why don't we just talk about that real quickly here, just because it's connected to zoning. So I had received some feedback from a neighbor who has a construction company about the stormwater exemption for residential. That's where the conversation, roughly was about. So his comment was, every other township in the surrounding area is at 1,000 feet, 1,000 square feet, and we're at 500 square feet. So, I think, I'm assuming, because there's so many different rules out there, these builders have to know all the different things, and he was looking from a consistency perspective to have it all 1,000, and clearly it then reduces costs for people, doing whatever project they're doing. So, I thought we'd have a conversation in public, talk about it. Hutch and Tara gave some feedback on it. So I think it's helpful if you want to respond with what you guys discovered. I think we did have conversations about that way back when, probably in 2016.
14 was when it was
2014.
adopted. Yeah.
Okay. And so, yeah. So if you want to just give a little context to the discussion that happened back then, and then we can discuss more.
Sure. We had and Tara researched this for me, so if I go straight here, let me know. But we had the township engineer at the time look at the provisions that were in the model ordinance that was prepared, and look at some of the developments that we already had in place in the community. And he did some calculations to indicate that if every lot within those developments got 1,000 square feet of additional area, it would overload the existing stormwater facilities that had been constructed as part of that development. And so on that basis, in addition, we looked at the typical shed that somebody puts in, the typical patio that somebody puts in. They're all typically smaller than 500 square feet. So in order to do those sort of typical things, they're still below the threshold of doing a small project. So that's where the 500 square feet came from.
The statement that every other township is at 1,000, is that true? Have we looked at other?
I don't know if every other one
sure.
is
But the local
1,000, but
Manhattan
I
Township
think,
is
yes, there are many of the other ones that are out there that are 1,000, yes.
And what's the state minimum or the state maximum that we can do for a small project?
So Lancaster County Planning Commission developed a model ordinance under the Water Resources Plan, and that's what was approved by DEP. That's 1,000. So that's you can go lower than that, but you can't go higher
Got it.
in your own ordinance.
I'm all for going to 1,000.
Their concern was that if 500, if we didn't capture this at that lower level, we may not we may overwhelm the existing infrastructure. So that.
We don't, I mean,
Right.
but again, I don't think that's a great metric. I mean, if everyone drove their car on the road, we'd overrun the roads. But we do traffic studies to say that guess what, most people don't drive their car at the exact same time. So we understand that 100% of people won't do anything. It's usually somewhere in the middle.
So you were saying is if everyone did X, added 500, we would have
At 1,000.
1,000, we'd have a challenge.
Right, and of course, these facilities, they get put in 2002, and then they're there forever.
Yes,
So,
sure.
properties change hands, new owners decide to do different things, so it evolves over, it's not a snapshot, it's an evolution over a long time.
When they do that, they need a permit. So it becomes cumulative at that point. So it's when you exceed 1,000 from the original is when it would trigger stormwater projects.
For us right now, we can exceed 500 and fall into a small project.
Right. But what I understand, it would be a small project.
Yeah, it would be a small
1,000.
project over 1,000.
Yeah.
That's the change.
Or
Yeah, that's-
cumulative.
They're both cumulative.
They're both
Exactly.
cumulative.
It's basically what's the trigger.
Yeah, we're changing the trigger from 500 square feet to 1,000.
How do you address all those people that have already come in and have done a small project because they've gone over the 500?
Well, the same way we address all the people who did these before we required it. I mean, it's every ordinance we do adds another layer or takes it away. So, I mean, it's the same way we did it last time.
I mean, we get special exceptions for other things and then it becomes a right.
Yeah.
It's not great, but that's what it is. I mean,
So consistency would be my interest.
consistency across the
Well, just
municipality.
regional consistency.
Right. That was.
We usually have a small contractor do those small projects.
Well, or just even if you live about 200 yards from West Lampeter Township, and your neighbor does something and you don't, or vice versa, and I just think.
Well, the line goes through my
Yeah, I was gonna say, he lives 50 yards away. I live 200 yards away.
Put your pagoda on the front
I
side.
love where I'm in the right township.
Unless you want to do a 900-foot project.
Well, I did an 800-foot with pervious.
Consistency.
Yeah,
I'm
where you
pointing to you, Darren.
Uh,
What do you think about consistency of these things? I'm just saying, you're planning and zoning, and try to find ways in a region to be consistent. I do. I think it makes sense, in a regional community. I guess, I don't know us talking about this when we went through it. Were we consistent or inconsistent? Maybe we did, but I just don't remember it.
We actually did have that conversation because we were, going, 500 square feet.
Was that our first year?
6 years ago.
But I mean, generally with stormwater, and I call it sort of my general approach, if we have a state mandate that our stormwater state mandates are already onerous, we should make an attempt not to be more onerous to our residents.
Just like your township 2006 ordinance started requiring every non-residential property to stormwater. It was one of the only ones in the county. We're still one of the only ones that requires or has no exemption for non-residential.
We should look at an exemption for non-residential.
No exemption.
We can't tell if you're smiling.
Yeah, I can tell she's smiling. I think, Ethan rode along with the police a few times. I think he should ride along with Tara too. He should
Be happy to.
spend some time in her office, see what she deals with. Yeah, so I think we gave some direction. It sounds like there's board wanting to move to 1,000 for the break point, I'll call it, for the small project exemption. Yeah, I guess what I'm hearing from the board is, and what I heard from my neighbor, which makes total sense, is that, there's tons of municipalities in Lancaster County. How many?
Too many.
60 something, right? 60. Way too many rules. These guys and gals are trying to do business, and they want their customers to spend that money on the project, on the hard, the hardscaping, the this, the that, and they're spending money on engineering and stormwater and all those things. But,
And we're going to recoup that because we're charging a stormwater fee based off of impervious. So especially as
true.
that
That is
evolves over
true.
the next 10 years, we're going to have better calculations of impervious. So I think the stormwater management is going to be fine in the end.
I agree. But, I think for a small builder, it's the more consistent we are with neighboring townships, the less work they have to do, trying to figure it all out. So, okay.
You want us to make an aggressive attempt to get everybody to change to 500 square feet. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. No, I am not saying that.
But if they all did, then we can.
And I don't think they will. So I think we should go in their direction on this one. Sometimes we are going to go in their direction. Sometimes we're not. But in this case, I'd like to move in their direction.
I think I would just like to offer,
Sure.
we really do want to take a look more closely at the model ordinance from DEP for 2022, because we did
Yep.
just change the stormwater ordinance to ensure that we were following
Yep.
that.
Okay.
And I don't recall looking at this particular area of that ordinance, because we had already met
I think that's a great idea.
exceeded the Lancaster County.
Okay.
I think that's a great idea as a next step. We gave you general direction that way, but I think you as the expert should take a look at the model from the experts and then come back and let us know what you find. Thank you,
Yep.
Chief.
Yeah, I'm taking off.
Good.
Hey, if you guys want to talk some more about this.
Stormwater
Thank you,
management
Chief.
or,
Yeah.
okay, got it.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you. I appreciate you
that.
staying. Okay. Any other questions you'd like from the board? Okay. Next on the agenda, we have, you don't need a motion for the hearing date. You have what you need.
No,
August.
we're good.
Okay, good. Okay. Authorized legal services proposal regarding cable TV franchise renewal process.
So our cable franchise agreement expires in December of 2022. And as a result, through FCC regulations, Comcast notified us of their desire to begin the renewal process, which they have to do 30 months in advance of the expiration. So I did take the liberty of contacting Cohen Law Group. We worked with them the last time we went through a franchise renewal. We did it as a group with some of the municipalities in the LAMC. I have reached out to municipalities in the county to see if they're similarly situated and if they want to do this as a group effort. I found out as a result of that outreach that there were a number of municipalities that went through this last year. And they've been willing to share their updated franchise agreements with me. So although I'd like your consideration of the ability to work with Cohen to do the renewal process, if after we compare the new ones from municipalities that did it last year to our current one, and there really isn't all that much to do there, we might not need a whole lot of legal help. We could probably just talk to Comcast and say, hey, we want what they got last year, and we'd be done with this.
Mhm.
So I'd like that flexibility to,
Sure.
to at least consider that
Yeah.
possibility.
Agreed. Okay.
I agree. There's also, I think we can, I was at one of those LIMC meetings. I think you can request to get on, basically sync up with all the other folks. And to request either a longer term or a shorter term just to get to where we're all renewing in the same year. Then we can all go in together and group negotiate. So I know several other folks are just doing like a shorter time frame or a longer one just to get to where everyone's synced up.
Right, a couple years here and there just to
Yeah.
make it match up. Yeah.
Okay. You need a motion to authorize the ability to negotiate and make that decision
And/or
and/or go
use
into a contract.
Cohen Law Group
Yep.
to go
Yep.
through the process.
Yep.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Motion made and second. Any other comments from public, board? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Okay, and then we have engineering proposal for Lincoln Highway East Streetscape implementation phase 3.
Right. We just received last week the agreement from, the signed agreement finally from PennDOT for the multimodal funding for this project. So we have both PennDOT multimodal and Commonwealth Financing Authority multimodal funds, and of course township matching requirements. So we'd like to go forward now to get this started. As you know, a number of years ago, McMahon was authorized through PennDOT to be the consultant firm to prepare the plans related to these improvements, and they've provided us with this proposal. I do believe that the scope is what we need, and I'd ask for your approval to begin that process. We did send out letters earlier in the month notifying property owners that there'd be surveyors out there and taking measurements and things, so
Yep.
property owners were on notice of those sorts of things. So we sort of started a little bit in advance of getting this in place, but we'd like to get this going.
Make a motion, we approve the proposal for McMahon Transportation Engineers and Planners as presented.
Okay, motion made. Second by John. Any other comments from the board? Public? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, Hutch, manager's report.
Yeah, I'll probably let you read that more than go over it in much detail unless you have any questions about anything related to MS4 or the streetscape plan or Walnut Street, Greater Lancaster Heritage Pathway, or pandemic situation. I think you're probably all pretty much up to speed
The
there.
parks thing, Ralph, I believe me, I'm not narking them. I'm glad the kids are using it. It's just pointing out, you said there's no organizing. There's somebody who's organizing, it must be like little Pee-wee soccer or something on my side of Florida Park. Using a space that's never been used before, behind Susie's 1860s, her Airbnb. So, I mean, it's, once again, I'm glad they're using it. You know, it was just, they showed up there and they put cones out and everything. It's really nice and organized. So, but it's, once again, they're just.
Yeah, we're not looking for that stuff
Nope,
to shut it
got it.
down, it's just.
Totally got it.
Yeah.
But the park is busy, I'm telling you.
Oh, man.
Oh, yeah.
Man, I have spent the past 6 weekends at one of the trails at Lancaster County somewhere. If you have not used the one that goes from Elizabethtown to Mount Gretna to Lebanon yet, you're doing it.
I've done it.
Conewago?
Yep.
I've never used it. Oh my gosh, I took about 10 family members up there on Saturday, and we biked from E-Town to Mount Gretna, off the trail, went to Jigger Shop, and then got back on. It's 22 miles. I mean, you could go another 20 miles into Lebanon if you want to.
Wow.
I'll
Done
put-
that.
It is covered in trees. It is a canopy the whole way, shaded, and it was packed with the people. I mean, you go to the Columbia one, the Northwest River one. I've been there 3 weekends. That is like the boardwalk. I mean, it is packed with people.
I just go to the secret ones with no people.
Yeah. But it's just, people are out. They want to get out and enjoy the outside.
The weather's been great.
Weather's been great.
And when is that paving? I know we have looks like a handmade sign at Flory Park saying no parking, there's paving going on.
Yeah, the paving's starting tomorrow, I think. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, the sign looks like some random person just started writing on it. So
Hey,
I
we
mean,
saved money.
The park at Gibbons Park at Florida. No, it's
Knowlton.
Boy, they've been doing some work in there too.
Yeah.
Where's the state?
Down in
Gibbons.
Knowlton.
Smoketown. Gibbons Park at
Oh,
Knowlton.
Gibbons Park. Yeah.
The stream bank
Yeah.
improvements.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a project that is being paid for with 319 money through the Conservation District. And the contractor that they hired to do that is the same one that did the work in Flory Park. And yeah, if you haven't been down to see it, it's just an amazing transformation of that stream.
At Gibbons.
At Gibbons.
Oh, yeah, it's shocking.
It's fantastic.
I would say it's shocking.
Yeah.
It is so neat looking.
Yeah, it's really
It
good.
really is.
So I think he's probably going to be in there for a little bit longer, and yeah, 3 more
Wow.
weeks of work.
Is it just him? Does he have like people working with him?
It's really just this one guy and
Yeah,
the
that's what I
equipment that
mean.
he runs down there.
He's done all by himself.
He's a magician, yeah.
Wow.
Um, yeah.
Okay. I mean, the kayakers that I've been seeing come to my place. I mean, it's-
My back, like, right around me is just packed.
I know.
Fishermen on the
Yes,
other
oh my
bank,
gosh, you guys are-
kayakers,
It's
canoers.
just, the activity has been,
That is one thing I'll mention, which I think I mentioned somewhere in my notes, that we have received complaints about parking on Mill Creek Road.
Right,
And
right.
the issue there at the tunnel. So, I think eventually when we get parking
Given.
on
Yes.
Gibbons Park, we can sort of address
Yeah.
that. But in the meantime, I don't know.
There's
how to
plenty of
change
room
it.
to park up there.
Safety or the types
Um,
of activities that's
It's,
going on?
I think there are times when maybe there are probably a few too many cars that try to get jammed in there and it gets a little unsafe. There's litter, people are, not
Right.
picking up after themselves sometimes, but,
can we put a trash can there somewhere under the bridge?
I suppose we
That's a great
could.
fishing spot right there. A lot of people take their kids to go play in the dam area.
Right.
I mean, I've cleaned up that area a couple times.
But
You know,
just put a
there-
trash can.
Yeah, I don't know if that invites more. We could try that.
I pick up trash, Toy Park, and I use our trash cans all the time.
Yeah.
I go along the Stratford Pike, turn to the park, pick it up, throw it in the trash can. I mean, I know I'm throwing the trash can, but it is with trash I'm finding around.
Sure. Yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
Charlie's done a great job, his team has, cutting all the, what do they call them, the bait trees or whatever for the.
Spotted lantern.
Spotted
flare.
lantern flies.
Yep.
So up on the hill by Newhouser's house,
Yes.
they cut a lot out, but
Yes.
they are leaving what's there now, right?
Yes.
Okay. Deer and fox use that.
Mhm.
I mean, I walked up there last Sunday and up by Bob's house, in that bank. It's a great little place to hide. Man, I looked up and there were 3 little foxes.
Wow.
Playing in the
Wow.
grass, kind of ducked into the weeds and then looked out at me, and that evening I went out just to go for another walk again with a flashlight, because you can almost always spot deer. And I walked through the park and my gosh, it's like
After
out
dusk?
there.
Really? Really? After dusk?
Yes.
Because it's closed, you're not allowed in.
No, it was just before. But they run across, the Stratford Pike there. It's pretty cool.
I don't know if they're completely done getting rid of the junk trees, but they're not clear cutting the whole
Okay,
thing.
good. Because it's really a great place for wildlife.
Sure.
And camping.
Well, yeah.
Okay. Any other comments from staff, board? Okay, I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Second by John. Any other comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Long meeting, guys.
Oh my gosh, guys.
9:43.